Welcome back, mitochondriacs. We are back today to further discuss, I should say, red light therapy as a potential addition to metabolic therapy and how it could dovetail in nicely. And so I was thankfully alerted by some folks that I am consulting with, and they let me know that there was actually a second Seafried paper that was published in December of 2024. And this one is pretty exciting also. And I plan on presenting on it probably next week after we finish red light therapy, if we're able to finish red light therapy by then. But I saw a short video clip of Dr. Seafried talking about this paper when it came out. And it basically kind of takes an axe to conventional medicine's thought or hypothesis that basically, although a lot of mainstream medicine understands that glutamine consumption is upregulated for cancer cells, they believe that it is being used in a way that runs through the electron transport chain and the mitochondrial oxphos system, and they basically definitively ruled that out. And I thought that was pretty cool. So we'll talk about that. I think this is very important information to cover. This is a brand new paper that came out the 10th of December, and I think it's going to help us on our understanding of cancer metabolism and biology, and give us some more security in understanding that these mechanisms, although not like completely worked out yet, are really getting. I mean, Dr. Seafried and his group are doing such a great job. I mean, I cannot be more thankful to what the kind of work they're doing up at Boston College. So if anybody has the ability to, I don't know, donate to his group to get more things done, I mean, they're doing the work, and they are really going against the grain and proving, study after study that what Dr. Seafried has been talking about, what Oda Warburg has been talking about for a long, long time, is in fact true. And this is the paradigm shift within oncology that we need. But let's refocus back on red light therapy and cancer. And I touched on it a little bit the last time, and there was a piece of one of the studies that said that some of the in the in vitro studies, they were showing that maybe red light therapy was actually making things worse. Although the majority of the in vivo, either animal or human studies, that doesn't seem to be the case. But I just wanted to pull the paper that when you search for Google, if you search Google for red light therapy and cancer, or if you search, some of these publications where they kind of like give a warning about red light and cancer, this is one of the main papers that they cite in their paper. And I wanted to kind of tear it apart, not necessarily refute their findings, but more like just look at what they found and kind of like maybe give us all a little bit of reassurance. So this paper is titled Red LED light is influenced by IL-6 to promote the migration ability of oral squamous cell carcinoma cell line. And what they did essentially was they shined red light at 630 nanometers with a pretty low power density at 20 microwatts per centimeter, should be squared. And this was a cell culture, okay? And there were for me, there were some issues because it didn't actually show for how long. I could not find it in the study, in the methods anywhere, where it showed how long they were actually exposed to red light. I don't know if it was 5 minutes. I don't know if it was 10 minutes. I don't know if it was an hour. I don't know. But the bottom line is they got, red light at 630 nanometers for, a fairly low irradiance level. And they even showed the distance above the cell layer, but they didn't really show, at least unless I missed it. But I really was digging for it to see how long they got these and what the actual dose was. That's measured in a different it's joules per centimeter squared. But I'll digress. And so what they found was that regarding the proliferative ability, these squamous cell carcinoma cells showed no significant difference in proliferation activity, but increased the proliferation. Excuse me. I'm going to say this again. So this WST1 was the control group, and it showed no increase in proliferative activity for the control group, the non-cancer cells. But for the cancer cells, for the squamous cell carcinoma, it showed a 1.1. So a very, very, 10% potentially increased fold in proliferative activity compared to the control group. And anyway, I think it was interesting that it was, barely above the baseline. And then that's what everyone is kind of so concerned about. And I just think that it's probably, again, these are cells in a culture. They got, red light for we don't even know how long. And it showed slightly increased proliferative activity for these cells compared to the control. And, one would be zero, right? It would be no improved growth. So, I mean, it's hard for me to think that is going to be significant for us in an animal or in a human model. But I guess more studies do need to be done. I mean, I don't think it's settled science, but I just think that I'm less concerned about red light therapy growing cancer, especially after the last talk we had and kind of understanding how it would be used for the therapy, right? I don't think anybody would be recommending that we use red light therapy and you keep eating cookies and, remaining sedentary and not doing anything else for yourself, right? It would be red light therapy as an adjunct to the foundations of metabolic therapy. And I think you're going to see why I'm so bullish on it for people who are employing metabolic therapy or in trying to employ metabolic therapy, because if anybody's out there who's tried to be on a therapeutic ketogenic diet and has done the work to really track their glucose ketone index, but let's say they're not even checking GKIs, they're just tracking their glucose levels, with a continuous blood glucose monitor or whatnot, then, it would make sense that they see how difficult it is, and especially if, let's just be honest, let's just be very honest. People who get cancer in general are not super metabolically healthy. Now, are there exceptions to that? Yes, there are. But in general, most people are not super metabolically healthy. And so you may have prediabetes, or you may have frank diabetes, or, kind of God forbid, you may have like insulin resistant or insulin dependent diabetes, right? Where you actually have been on, Lantus, Levemir, Novolog, Humalog for a long period of time. And you may have a really hard time, maybe even an impossible time, of getting your blood glucose where you need to be. And that magic number seems to be at minimum less than 80 milligrams per deciliter on average to have success with metabolic therapy. And, people who I work with work really, really hard to get their blood glucose down and still have difficulties. So my point is that we need every tool we have in our tool bag to be used against this problem. And I do think red light therapy can serve at least in that role. At least in that role. Now, is there other roles that it could serve as, as we talked about in the last video, where we like kind of overdose the cancer with red light therapy and it creates reactive oxygen species and damages cancer cells or kills cancer cells? I think there's definitely utility there, and that needs to be explored. And it can even be further improved likely by adding a photosensitive molecule, as we'll talk about during the photodynamic therapy kind of live stream. But until then, what we can use it for definitively likely is lowering blood glucose. And I want to go through some of the studies over the years where they've looked at red light therapy as a way to improve hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, and improve insulin resistance. And so I'm going to start with this paper here that was published in 2021 called Photobiomodulation Therapy Ameliorates Hyperglycemia and Insulin Resistance by Activating Cytochrome C Oxidase Mediated Protein Kinase B in Muscle. And ultimately what it shows here is that here we showed that PBMT, photobiomodulation therapy, reduced blood glucose and insulin resistance and reversed metabolic abnormalities in skeletal muscle in 2 diabetic mouse models. PBMT accelerated ATP and ROS generation by elevating cytochrome C oxidase activity. ROS induced activity or activation of phosphatase and tensin homolog P10 protein kinase B, AKT, signaling after PBMT promoted glucose transporter 4 translocation and glycogen synthase activation, altering glucose uptake and glycogen synthesis in skeletal muscle. So this is pretty neat. And so what they did was they were looking at the muscle cells of these mice, and they were looking at how their blood sugar changed, when they were exposed to red light therapy. And this is a pretty busy graphic, and I understand that, but if you can just bear with me. So you can see that the white circle here was PBMT plus high fat diet. And so you see here that glucose is significantly lower in the PBMT group, and it's pretty much an immediate effect. I mean, you see it after 1 week, you see a decrease, right? So and it continues to kind of trend down to where you hit, you go from 160 in these mice down to 100. That's a significant change of blood glucose for these mice. And then they looked at blood glucose when they were in the fed state and fasted state for the kind of control group, right? And then the people who got, or the mice who got the red light therapy. And again, you see, 50% or more drops for these particular mice with red light therapy. So there's definitely something to this. And, there's actually been quite a few studies on red light therapy for insulin resistance for diabetes, which is why when there was a cool paper that was published this year or in 2024, it was not really much of a surprise, but it was a neat thing to see them do for the average person in humans. So this one's called Photobiomodulation for Diabetes and Its Complications, a review of general presentation mechanisms and efficacy. And this was also published in December of 2024. And it says here that diabetes mellitus is a metabolic disease that is marked by persistent hyperglycemia due to inadequate insulin secretion and insulin resistance. Its prevalence is increasing yearly. Diabetes mellitus can lead to serious health complications that are the primary cause of mortality and disability among diabetic patients, including diabetic retinopathy, diabetic foot ulcers, diabetic peripheral neuropathy, diabetic peritonitis, and so on. Traditional treatments of diabetes and complications still suffer from limited clinical efficacy and high therapeutic side effects. Photobiomodulation, which utilizes low levels of red or near infrared laser to irradiate cells or tissues, that should be just light, it doesn't have to be a laser, to irradiate cells and tissues, has been shown to be efficacious for a wide range of organ damage. In this study, we focus on the applications of PBM for diabetes and complications and mechanisms. So in this study, they go over many of the studies that were done before this kind of review was, put together. And you see that they did a bunch of studies on different rat and mice models, and then they have the human models. And it's been shown to have effects on blood glucose. The earliest one they have here in this particular study looking at studies was in 2013. This one had one as early as 2009. So this is not a new therapy. Red light therapy has been out for a long time. It's just kind of in vogue right now within the health community, but it doesn't mean that it's not like been kind of more established within the research community for quite some time. And I just want to like go over this paper because it has some pretty interesting findings and conclusions that it says here. So for lowering of blood glucose, it says the level of blood glucose can be directly decreased, and various glucose metabolic pathways in the body can be mobilized through PBM irradiation of skeletal muscle or blood. Low-level laser stimulates mitochondrial components, modulates redox signaling in the respiratory chain, and affects glycolysis, pentose phosphate pathway, and gluconeogenesis pathway, as well as sucrose and starch metabolism to promote glucose metabolism. The enhancements of mitochondrial function following PBM irradiation of skeletal muscle is also closely linked to reduction in blood sugar levels. Insulin-dependent glucose uptake accounts for 80% of glucose uptake by skeletal muscle. In muscle tissue irradiated with PBM, giant mitochondria are formed through fusion of small mitochondria. Changes in configuration of giant mitochondria can enhance both energy transfer and distribution of calcium in cytoplasm. And I just want to take a second here. Yeah, Access 2 says using with photosynthesizers. Yes, we will talk about, we're going to do an entire live stream on photodynamic therapy, and I'm going to talk about both natural and pharmacologic photosynthesizing molecules so that we can use, so we can potentially employ photodynamic therapy. But in this particular case, I wanted to really highlight this particular paragraph here. What we see here is that when you irradiate tissue with photobiomodulation, we form giant mitochondria. And that's kind of like another name for mitochondrial fusion. And gosh, we haven't talked about mitochondrial fusion for a while. We talked about it during the mitochondrial dynamics series, but let me just see if I can quickly, I'm going to annotate that we're at 5:43. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to pull something up real fast that I think could be an unforeseen way to dovetail this information into what we're talking about here. As you can imagine, I have a lot of slides to pull from. I don't have it readily accessible. But when we talked about mitochondrial dynamics, we were talking about how the less efficient mitochondria are when there's excess mitochondrial fission happening, which is where mitochondria will separate into two mitochondria. And that's part of the mitochondrial dynamics. And then when mitochondria fuse into one mitochondrial fusion, then the mitochondria are more efficient. And there are certain physiologic states that can precipitate that. So that would be like fasting, calorie restriction, ketogenic diets, exercise, etc. Certain things can kind of tip the scales into the more mitochondrial fusion, and that makes mitochondria more efficient. They don't produce as much reactive oxygen species. Like they're just better at doing their job of making energy. And so basically what we're seeing here, is that we're seeing mitochondrial fusion happening and more efficient mitochondria that make energy more effectively by the use of just red light by itself, which I think is a really neat finding. Yeah, someone asked me, "Wow, how long did it take me to put all those slides together?" I don't know, but a long, long time, and it's still going on. I mean, as a matter of fact, last week I think I was doing a deep dive onto methylene blue and detuned depolated water, so it grows every day. Every day. So, in addition to the formation of giant mitochondria, photobiomodulation also regulates mitochondrial enzyme activity and gene expression in the nucleus, probably as well as in the mitochondrial DNA as well. And photobiomodulation has the potential to regulate cytochrome C oxidase to promote greater electron transfer within the respiratory chain and facilitate enhance protein transport across the intermitochondrial membrane. Photobiomodulation activates complex 1, complex 2, complex 3, complex 4, succinate dehydrogenase, citrate synthetase. So I kind of have to really like pause here and unpack that. So the main place that photobiomodulation has been thought to have the major effect is on cytochrome C oxidase, which is the fourth cytochrome in the complex 4, right? But what we're learning over time is that there are likely dozens of effects of red light therapy. We kind of touched on it in the last video about how it can structure water and make the electron transport ATPase more efficient because the water density has changed, and the water battery that is formed with the exclusion zone and the coherent domains. Like there's so much to learn about how red light and light in general interacts with intracellular water as a way to improve our function. But that being said, I think this is interesting because although complex 4 is the main red light chromophore for red light therapy or PBMT, you're seeing that there are several other enzymes that are within the electron transport chain. We have complex 1, 2, and 3 that are enhanced by red light therapy, as well as these other TCA enzymes, succinate dehydrogenase and citrate synthetase. Pretty fascinating. I mean, I think that we're going to learn a lot more, hopefully in the next like 5 to 10 years. But this is very exciting of what they're figuring out with red light therapy. And I want to also say that photobiomodulation therapy regulated genes encoded for enzymes and required in myoglycogen synthesis, as well as such as glycogen synthase, glucose 6 phosphate translocase, glucose phosphorylase. The upregulation of the expression of these genes led to high levels of myoglycogen synthesis. So, moreover, not only have we seen in the previous study showing that there is increased activity in the muscles, increasing glucose transporters that help remove glucose from the actual bloodstream to lower blood glucose to help starve, basically cancer cells of the glucose that's in the bloodstream readily, right? So it kind of competes with it like exercise, like you'll see another modality we'll talk about later. But this is another mechanism of how red light therapy can dovetail into metabolic therapies. It's basically stealing away the glucose out of the bloodstream. But what you're seeing here also is that you're getting more energy out of it, which is good, but you're also upregulating genes that are associated with the storage of glycogen, which is the stored form of glucose within muscle cells, all from shining red light on our bodies. So it's pretty astounding that the amount of epigenetic, gene changes, as well as just enhancements in our overall physiology by red light therapy. So although we're talking about this as a dovetail into metabolic therapy for cancer, anybody who doesn't have cancer that wants to help prevent disease, that maybe has that prediabetes, diabetes, and wants to figure out a way to enhance their ability to get healthy, you can see that red light therapy should be something that should consider using as that therapy. So also, they found improvements in insulin resistance. The glucose transporter type 4, GLUT4, plays a crucial role in the process of insulin-stimulated glucose uptake into adipose tissue and muscle tissue. When insulin is present, it stimulates the translocation of GLUT4 from intracellular compartments to the cell membrane, ultimately leading to an increase in glucose uptake. This study showed that PBM can enhance the glucose tolerance of diabetic mice on a high-fat diet to promote the phosphorylation of this particular serine residue. Additionally, this therapy can reverse the decreases in GLUT4 expression and phosphorylation induced by this high-fat diet. Now, some of you may not be aware, the high-fat diet that they give these mice to induce diabetes is not the type of diet that you're likely going to be on a healthy version of a therapeutic ketogenic diet. Okay, it's not apples and apples. This is like shortening and like basically like seed oils and trans fat with a bunch of sugar too. So it's like the worst possible diet for any animal. But they call it a high fat diet, and it scares people because it's like, oh my god, am I going to be inducing diabetes because of the language of this particular mouse feed? And I don't think you're at risk of that. Moreover, a substantial amount of evidence suggests that inflammation caused by immune cells and adipocytes is another pathogenic mechanism of insulin resistance and diabetes. Immune cells secrete these free fatty acids and cytokines such as tumor necrosis factor alpha, or TNF alpha, and the excess circulating free fatty acids, TNF alpha, and other factors promote insulin resistance kind of picture. And they found that the group that did PBM had significantly lower concentrations of IL-1 alpha, IL-1 beta, IL-6, basically the same inflammatory markers that are proposed to be responsible for at least contributing to insulin resistance are lower with red light therapy. So let's see if we can, before I move on to the next study, recap. We are increasing translocation of glucose transporters in muscle and fat cells as a way to lower blood glucose. If there's any insulin resistance, it helps overcome that. And then on top of that, it upregulates the cell's ability to handle extra glucose in the muscle cells through upregulation of glycogen enzymes, through gene expression changes in the nucleus, right? And then in addition to that, it enhances mitochondrial dynamics as a way to improve the efficiency of mitochondria by making these giant mitochondria, or these fused mitochondria. And then in addition to that, it stimulates complex 1, 2, 3, 4 in the mitochondria, most notably cytochrome C oxidase, cytochrome 4, or complex 4, to improve ATP synthesis. Then, because we are in a more the state of the interfacial water and the exclusion zone water, and making the water less dense because of the changes from red light therapy. In addition to that, we have improvements in efficiency of the ATPase within healthy mitochondria. And that, for the normal mitochondria, the healthy mitochondria, is actually going to make less reactive oxygen species. It's going to improve ATP function, and it's going to ultimately, what we're using it for in this particular context, but you could see it could be in other contexts as well, would be it lowers blood glucose ultimately, and it's going to compete for it's going to create a competitive advantage for the body over the cancer in this case, right? Because similar to how we showed in exercise, how it robbed the glucose away from cancer cells and it robbed the glutamine away from cancer cells, this is basically another mechanism of that. And let me just tell you that there is a method to my madness. When I have clients and I recommend that they eat outside, that they walk outside before and after a meal, or I have them walk if it's too cold, I have them walk maybe potentially, or do some kind of exercise in front of a red light panel, or in front of, a heat lamp bulb at worst case scenario. The reason is because I want to use as many tools as possible to soak up that glucose, to help minimize glucose spikes before, during a meal, but also to overall lower their average blood glucose to help get that GKI down, right? Because that is a big deal. I'm going to reiterate, someone that who's very prominent in the space, who I have a lot of respect for, and who was able to heal themselves with metabolic therapy of a terminal cancer, said that it doesn't matter how much HBOT you do, how much IV vitamin C you do, how much, DAWN you do. If your blood glucose is on average more than 80, you're not going to do well. And so this micro series about glucose, and maybe a macro series, depending on how far we take this, on glucose is so important. The glutamine is important too. The oxidative therapies are important too. It is a synergistic approach, but we got to get the glucose down, and this is one of the ways we can do it. Let me pause here, and I'll just say hello to those who said hello. And the photosensitizers, I'm gonna hit on a separate video. Yeah. So methylene blue, that will be part of the photodynamic therapy talk, and I have a lot to say about methylene blue. Any benefit on fibrosis tissues like lung? It's a great question. I do not know the literature with pulmonary fibrosis with photobiomodulation, but it would make sense that there would be some effect. Even if it wasn't like reversing the fibrosis, like would it improve oxygenation or, if efficiency? I don't know the answer to that. That's something we could look into. I don't know enough about pulmonary fibrosis with red light therapy. Yeah, I don't know the answer to your question about ortho water versus para. I don't know the answer to that. Changing the spin through excitation. That would be, I hate to say it, and I don't want to like punt that, but I think I have to just punt that to someone who knows the answer to that. And that would be Dr. Jack Cruz, neurosurgeon. He would know the answer to that, like definitively about, changing electron spin and blah, blah, blah. What I can say is that red light therapy, to some degree, because remember, red light therapy is a blanket term. And when it's used in the literature, it's generally talking about visible red and near infrared in the 800 nanometer range. But red light therapy could technically be used from 600 nanometers all the way up to like 3000 plus nanometers, right? So the red, the visible red, the near infrared, the mid infrared, and the far infrared. And so if you look at Dr. Pollack's lectures, the at least in their lectures, or at least in their studies, I should say, the most effective form of light that changed the EZ was actually far infrared, like right around 3000 nanometers was the kind of like the peak. Dr. Cruz personally believes that if you did the studies with deuterium depletion water or deuterium depleted water, you would have a much different effect, probably expanded effect at the infrared, but also there would be probably more of an effect with the UV, which I think is interesting. Do you recommend taking metformin with red light panel? Yeah, so I can't recommend anything on YouTube. Obviously, I can't practice medicine, but what I would say is that a combination approach is likely the most beneficial and required for most people, because again, getting that glucose down, below 80 on average is not an easy feat, so using as many things as you can, plus, what's cool is metformin. I'm not a huge fan for preventive medicine with metformin personally, or even for the treatment of diabetes. But I think that within the metabolic approach, it makes sense to use it for a short amount of time because it can get your blood glucose down. It also has effects on SLC7A11, if you remember, from the glutamine transporter, the cysteine glutamine antiporter that is responsible for making, or at least partially making, glutathione. Can red light therapy increase number of mitochondria systematically or opposed to just? Yes, as far as I know, and I'm probably not going to talk about it during this particular series, but red light therapy does have effects on the PGC1 alpha gene, which is the main, mitochondrial biogenesis gene pathway. So yes, red light therapy likely does increase number of mitochondria. Oh, is it systemically? Yeah, I don't think we know that yet. My guess tells me it probably is a non-linear effect, whereas you shine it on your back, you're going to get effects throughout your entire body. But I don't know that for a fact. Is red light therapy okay to use if someone has cancer? Yeah, I think that if I were you, I would watch the entire first live stream on red light therapy. And if you probably missed the first part of this particular live stream, I would go back to the beginning after we're done and talk. I did talk about it. I think it's um, very likely okay, and I think it's very likely helpful. But again, not by itself. I would not use red light therapy only. First of all, if I had cancer, I would not only do red light therapy, right? I would be doing everything I possibly could, and that would include being on a ketogenic diet and doing all the things we talked about, exercising, etc. But I do think it would be useful to use red light therapy if I had cancer, if I was doing all those things, right? And then the question is, what should you do to add to that to make it even more effective? That's where we're going to talk about photodynamic therapy in the next video. Good deal. Someone received a red light panel yesterday while they're on metformin. Cool. I'm not familiar with that company, but as long as it has the wavelengths, that are studied, I think it's going to be okay. It's just that I'm particular to EMR Tech just because it was designed with Dr. Cruz, who's kind of the leader in this field, and on top of that, it has no flicker. It's about the same cost of everything else. I have other companies. I've been kind of going back and forth with people in the comments about other companies. I have red light panels from 2 other companies, and I just, at this point, what I know, I would just wish I would have, if I could go backwards, which I can't, I would just have bought EMR Tech only and be done with it. I don't see a problem with that, actually. Someone asked me, do you see issues with a red light protocol of 25 minutes followed by 45 minutes in an infrared sauna? I don't see a problem with that. Yeah, the proper sequence, that's to be determined. We don't know. Definitely probably after exercise, they see benefits with sauna, infrared sauna therapy, but I don't know the sequence. I mean, I don't think it really matters, if you want me to be honest with you. If you want my honest to God opinion, I think that we were designed to be exposed to red and infrared light all day long from sunup to sundown. If you look at the solar spectrum of like what the main frequencies of light are from the sun all day, sun up to sundown, it's near infrared. 55% is near infrared. So we're supposed to be exposed to it all day long, which is why probably no one had diabetes back in the day, because they were outside all day and they were getting red light. All right, so let's move on. So this is another paper that was published in 2022. It's called Photobiomodulation Therapy on the Treatment of Insulin Resistance and Narrative Review. And it says results, in fact, recent in vitro and in vivo studies have demonstrated improvements in insulin resistance and skeletal muscle, adipose tissue, hepatic cells mediated by photobiomodulation therapy. Furthermore, there is evidence that photobiomodulation therapy can potentiate exercise-induced improvements in insulin resistance through ameliorating mitochondrial dysfunction, reducing inflammation, and modulating oxidative stress. And I think this is a really probably important place to say that these therapies are synergistic in nature, right? Like, we're going to see some effect by being on a ketogenic diet in a vacuum. We're going to see some effect potentially of dawn in a vacuum. We're going to see some effect of red light therapy in a vacuum. But it's when you start to combine these things, right? You see that there's a potentiated effect of exercise-induced improvements in insulin resistance. So like exercise plus PBM is a thing, right? Like, so Dr. Jack, one of my mentors, Dr. Jack Cruz, always talks about it's better to work out outside than in a blue lit gym, right? Because blue light can increase your blood glucose and increase oxidative stress and cortisol, right? And impair your immune system. Whereas red light can have the opposite effect. So like, should gyms, for example, if you're a gym owner and you're looking at this stuff, like, should you look at using like full spectrum bulbs or even like red light bulbs, like in the gym? It may be weird to some people, but it probably is much more beneficial for the clients, right? And that's, if anybody's ever been to Tulum, Mexico, there is this gym called the Jungle Gym, and it is outside on the beach at Tulum Beach. And it's like got these, like, I don't know how to describe it, like almost like a Fred Flintstone, like looking machines, right? Like they'll have like lat pull down machines and like bench presses and squat racks, but it's like with bamboo, like bars, and like you don't put on plates, you put on like rocks to like these baskets on the side. It's so cool. But it's like in the sun, right? Like it's outside in a tropical environment. That's like the 19th degree latitude north, right? So you're like in the sun getting basked with red light therapy while you're, in fresh air, and you're getting, these exercises, which is really cool exercise too. It's like not just like a machine, like set travel like of the muscle. It's like you have to use like stabilizing muscles you never even knew you had. So like I think that like centers could be set up where like people who have these terrible illnesses like could go and get like exercise with red light therapy, like red light therapy with photodynamic, chemicals, like saunas, you name it. I think this could help in people's, metabolic approaches, and then have a doctor who's able to help them with the medications and other stuff. I think that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, someone said that. Let me just look at some of these comments here. They're a UK company. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it. I mean, there's so many companies of red light therapies. I believe it. I believe it. I'm pretty set on the brand that I recommend, just because I think it's the best. But I'm not saying you're not going to get benefit. Yeah, someone said they have 4 platinum LED panels. Yeah, I do too. I have 4 Biomax 900s. If you know what that is, and it's on a big panel, and it's like 6 foot tall by like 4 feet wide. And I do think there's benefit to it. Don't you did not waste money. It's just that I wish at this point, what I know, I wish I would have bought a big EMR tech or a couple big EMR techs. But it is what it is. All right, so let's go down to the study that was published later in May of 2024, and this is the study that I reference a lot in my course on how to implement metabolic therapy, because it was such a amazing finding. But now, after doing the deep dive on red light therapy and diabetes and all that, it doesn't seem like it's so amazing, but it is amazing, right? Even in context of knowing how powerful red light therapy is in the context of insulin resistance, diabetes, hyperglycemia, et cetera, this study is still amazing. So what they did was they had subjects eat the same food, both the control group and the red light therapy group ate the same meal. And what they did was they shined red light, 670 nanometers, visible red light, for 15 minutes on someone's back, okay, before I ate the meal. And the people who didn't get the red light had, the blood glucose of whatever it was. And then the people who got red light therapy for 15 minutes on their back had an overall area under the curve of 27% decrease in blood glucose. So you can see how basically this could be very beneficial. Not only over weeks and months of lowering your blood glucose and your A1C, as our buddy here, Mark, mentioned. His A1C went from 5.2 to 4.8 after red light therapy. The only change he said was red light therapy, which is pretty freaking cool, right? So that's a significant drop. I mean, that's as much as metformin or some of these oral hypoglycemics with medications, basically. That is as effective as berberine or NAC or some of these other things that are. So that's a pretty amazing drop in A1C just from red light therapy. So you can see that there are immediate clinical benefits, right? So based off of this particular study that was published, now what I do is I actually recommend people to, because there's benefits in exercising, and it doesn't even take much. We're talking like less than 10 minutes. You're getting a benefit of exercise, like walking or rebounding or something, basically moving your body through space is what I had an endocrinology attending used to say, just move your body through space. But I'll digress. So moving your body through space for like less than 10 minutes or 10 minutes before and after a meal can have a significant effect on blunting the glucose response to whatever meal you're eating. And then I believe that there could be a synergistic benefit of exercise with red light therapy or under sunlight, which would be the best case scenario, as a way to further bring down those blood glucose numbers so that you can improve your overall GKI. And that's going to give you the best shot, really, of having success on metabolic therapy. Because let's just like be very honest, like keeping your if you want to do, let's say, high dose IV vitamin C therapy. I mean, does anybody know how much that costs? It costs hundreds of dollars, right? Like per session. If you want to be doing hyperbaric oxygen chamber, which a hard chamber and the right atmosphere and the right time and the right frequency, that's thousands of dollars potentially per week. Like, why would you not invest in something like this, and other ways to keep your blood glucose down? Because again, other people in the space have said with clinical experience that, um, it doesn't matter how much HBOT you do or how much Dawn you do. If your blood glucose is not on average less than 80, you're not going to have success. And I have to beat that drum because I want you all to have success. Yeah, I have a firewave light that I use as like ambient light or like focus therapy. Um, I think that I would probably not recommend anything less than, probably the Inferno or the I can never remember the other one. There's another one that's like 1,000 watts. It's like a 13 by 13 square that EMR Tech has. By the way, they have a sale going on. I don't know if you guys know this. Like, I took advantage of it personally. I've had other clients take advantage of it. It's like 30% off everything in the store right now. So, and some of them like are already discounted. So it's like, man, it's like nearly 50% off some of these lights. So if you're gonna get one, like get one now, because I have a discount code like that I can have people use. That's in the description of my videos, but it's only like 10% off or something like that, or maybe 15%. I can't remember, but you ain't gonna get a better deal than you are now on EMR Tech. So if you're looking at getting one. Life Pro. Yeah, I'm not familiar with Life Pro. I mean, there's so many, like I say, there's so many companies out there. Just do your due diligence on the wavelengths and the irradiance and so on and so forth. I'm just particular with EMR Tech. So I just wanted to go a little further and say that the literature is sadly lacking. Okay, like if there's any red light researchers out there who are listening to this broadcast, like take this as a like a please do this. There are almost no studies. So when I typed in infrared and blood glucose, A1C, there are no results found. Not on Google, not on PubMed for infrared light or not infrared light, but far infrared, um, and blood glucose and A1C. And my gut tells me that there is an effect, probably maybe not as substantial as near infrared, but an effect. And the studies need to be done. I mean, they have studies on infrared for all kinds of things, blood pressure, like, metabolic syndrome, like, all kinds of things, but they don't have it for blood glucose. And I think it'd be an easy study to do. The study, they need a glucometer, they need an A1C test of some participants who do, far infrared sauna, and get us some data so we can start recommending that as a way to improve, glucose control. It's pretty sad, that we don't have that. Um, oh, take it back. I did find one paper of sauna and glucose. It wasn't A1C, so it wasn't like a continuous thing. It was this is how, okay, this is how, in my opinion, mainstream medicine will say there's no evidence for sauna to improve your glucose, right? Like infrared sauna, right? Because, well, there's no studies done. True, there's no evidence that suggests that red light therapy or infrared sauna, excuse me, or far infrared light can improve your A1C. Okay, fair enough. There is no data. You're right. There's no studies done. But then, in addition to that, to make things worse, they do a study like this, right? A single sauna session does not improve glucose handling of people with type 2 diabetes. So let's just say hypothetically, you believed that there were benefits to your blood glucose and your metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance with a sauna. So you were like, okay, I'm going to buy a $5,000 infrared sauna. I'm going to set it up in my house. I'm going to build it. I'm going to find the space for it. And then I'm going to use it one time and expect to have results like I think it's silly. Like this is almost like a non-study. Like, why would you do this? I don't understand. But they put him in an infrared sauna for 40 minutes, and they did basically like a glucose tolerance test, which would basically be affected if you had kind of a longer term intervention. Like that'd be equivalent of like doing one chemotherapy session and like thinking, oh, cancer's not cured, so chemotherapy doesn't work. Or, metformin, one dose of metformin doesn't decrease A1C. It's ridiculous. But this is the kind of data we have. So it just goes to show that if there's any researchers out there who have the ability to do research on infrared saunas for insulin resistance, diabetes, hyperglycemia, et cetera, please do it because we need the data. What model of Spurdy units during these winter months? So Spurdy is different. Spurdy is an ultraviolet lamp, right? There's two Spurdy models. There's a Spurdy red and the Spurdy white. The Spurdy red is an UVA mostly, so that's going to tan you, and it's going to affect the POMC system, pro-opiomelanocortin system. And the Spurdy white is like 80 to 85% UVB, which is going to affect your vitamin D. So if you're looking to improve your vitamin D, then it would be the Spurdy white. You probably get some benefit from the Spurdy red because I think it's like 20% ultraviolet B, but it's just not. It's not made for that. The Spurdy red is more for tanning purposes, and so therefore, if it was me and I was going to buy a Spurdy, which I have two of them, I would buy the Spurdy white and use it to improve my vitamin D in the winter when you have a vitamin D winter. I would also say that I would not personally use a Spurdy, even though you probably can safely. I would not personally use a Spurdy without using a red light panel or a heat lamp bulb, like an infrared heat lamp bulb at the same time, just because there is no, there's no source of ultraviolet in nature that is by itself. There is, however, on the other hand, red and infrared light in nature by itself, right? And likely longer term exposures of infrared and red is much safer than longer term exposures to ultraviolet, but you do need ultraviolet to be healthy. Someone says, I believe this is the one that Dr. Peebler recommends. Are you sending a link or a picture? Yeah, totally. Because I don't know if you guys are aware, but some of these other, there's no link in the chat. I don't know if it didn't come through, but there is no. So there are companies out there like Chroma, for example, that make a vitamin D lamp that have red and infrared built in, and the Firestorm. But there are EMR Tech is making the Krypton series, which has UVA, UVB plus their red and infrared panel. But they are extremely expensive. Like as much as I love EMR Tech, like that price is not going to work for most people. They got to either come down on price and be more competitive, or I'm just going to continue to recommend Spurdy lights with EMR Tech red light panels, because it's just not going to. Most people can't afford, a $4,000 red light panel, especially if they want more than one of those. It's like, my God. So no, not gonna be the case. So I can't, in good faith, recommend those yet, even though I think that they're ingenious and I think that they make a lot of sense to have all that in one panel. They're just too expensive for me to recommend right now. Okay, so we have ad nauseum covered basically photobiomodulation therapy or red light therapy or low-level laser therapy, whatever you want to call it, for the assistance in hyperglycemia, type 2 diabetes mellitus, and insulin resistance. And you could see how if you were here just as a casual bystander who didn't have cancer, or you have diabetes and prediabetes or whatnot, you could see how these interventions could be helpful to you. Okay. Obviously, we're talking about this in the context of metabolic therapy for cancer and using it as a way to augment the therapy and a way to enhance the therapy as a way to get your blood glucose down, which is overall going to help your GKI. And yes, it has 1,000 watts. It's 13 by 13 by 7, and it's normally $1,000, and it's like less than $600 with the coupon code. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And you can stack them too. Like what I'm planning on doing is actually putting like 3 of them together on like a light stand and having them like a mega light. But for now, I bought one of those because man, I could not pull the trigger on that. It was too good of a deal. Anyway, I hope you learned a lot. I hope you can see how this could be. Well, yeah, I mean, if I had the ability to buy a $9,000 giant red light panel, I would totally do it, or the $18,000, Ultron light they had. But I think for us mere mortals, I think we have to kind of like stack them, probably be as good of as an effect. The other thing I would say to that before I close is that I personally think that these lights are going to last a long time, most of them. But I do have a little bit of, how do I want to say it? Let's say I did have 10 grand to drop on a light and I wanted to buy the powerful red light they have. I feel like, man, like what if one of the lights went out or a couple of the lights went out or part of the panel went out, and then like I've got this like giant red light panel that like, potentially like now isn't functional or like is less functional. And maybe they have a warranty that fixes it. I don't know. But I just like to have like, okay, if I have 3 like panels that cover my entire body, like 3 separate panels that work together, and one of those has a problem, then I can at least have 2 of them that are separate that have different electronics. I don't know. I just think about like kind of a 1 is none and 2 equals 1, type of scenario. So anyway, yes, the Firestorm is from EMR Tech. They have a bunch of different models, but I don't recommend anything less than the Firestorm or the Inferno just because they have the power. They have at least 1,000 watts. The Inferno, I think, has 1,400 watts, which is pretty powerful. Pretty powerful. Okay, so I hope you can see how red light therapy, photobiomodulation could be enhancing your metabolic therapy to lower your blood glucose. Again, not to be used in a vacuum. Please use it, in the way it's designed to be used. And it makes sense in combination with the rest of the metabolic approach. And I would also say no red light replaces the sun. So as much as I love EMR Tech or some of these other companies, the sun is still the best. So if you can get outside, prefer to do that by far. The next topic we're going to discuss is going to be photodynamic therapy, and it's going to be pretty comprehensive, talking about the natural and pharmacologic photosynthesizing molecules that will enhance red light therapy to make it into an oxidative stressor for cancer, even more so. We talked about how red light therapy, when you overdose, through the biphasic curves, you could potentially create reactive oxygen species within cancer cells while protecting the normal cells. And that's by itself. But when you start to add photosynthesizing molecules that are reactive to red light therapy, then you get like kind of a enhanced reactive oxygen species generation and potential oxidative stress therapy, similar to HBOT, IV vitamin C, etc. So until the next time we meet, I hope you have a great rest of your week and you get benefit of this video. And please like, share, and subscribe if you like these videos. And until next time.